So moving on from that, nice to get the age group and the professional athlete perspective from a race such as Arizona. Obviously Chris and TJ are training and racing with Power and have been for the last several years, so they have built up a lot of historical data to go back and look at retrospectively and help them plan their races. So just coming up, you know, it's important that when you're developing your race plan for a 70.3 and Ironman, that the data you're using to prescribe the intensity or the goal intensity for that race is accurate. So how do you guys come up with that number? You know, do you use your 5-hour power rides, Chris? Do you use your last half a dozen best 5-hour power outputs? Do you use your FTP test data going forward to extrapolate and look at, well, okay, FTP's 300, I want to ride at 75%, I'm going to target 250 watts for my Ironman. I mean, how do you come up with that data, or do you just feel it out on the day?
Yeah, so I kind of plan my Ironman pacing out a couple things. One, I'll have a pretty good idea of what my functional threshold power, or FTP, is for a given time, and I'll work a couple of FTP intervals, usually when I'm in Tucson going up Mount Lemmon, so I get a little bit of altitude there to keep me grounded on what my functional threshold power is. That set that I like to do is 2 by 15 minutes. Which is right around my threshold power. And then the other workout that I like to do is 4 or 5 times 45 minutes at my Ironman pace, and that'll give me a pretty good idea at the end of that, seeing whatever I can hold on my 5th interval at 45 minutes. I'm doing 15-minute recoveries on these, so that'll give me a pretty good idea at the 4th and 5th interval what I can hold. It'll be pretty close to what I should be aiming for in an Ironman. Obviously, if I'm going to start out at 300 watts for my first 45 minutes, it may seem really easy, and then by the end, I may only be able to hold 270, 275 because I'm that fatigued. So I know whatever I finish at should be what I try to start and pace off of. I think it's important to be well within your range and be able to build towards the middle of the race instead of start out too strong and finish weak. And I use a little bit of different strategy where I'll try to build my power more towards the middle of the race, slow down a little bit to get some nutrition in, and make sure that I can finish comfortably without straining myself a lot. So I like to start out easy, build a little harder, go easy to get some nutrition, back to the hard pace, and then finish nice and easy. So that's typically my race plan, largely based around my FTP and my 45-minute intervals, but also based around my nutritional needs as well. So.
How does that differ for you, Chris, or do you follow like a similar strategy?
Yeah, it'd be a very similar strategy. I think maybe the execution, or at least in the training, the analysis of the data is just slightly different. So, I mean, to sort of summarize or simplify the response would be that I certainly have a good understanding of my FTP, so my 1-hour power is important to me. And probably more important to me is my 5-hour power, and the data that I use is data from my long ride. Some of that could be done in the format of a main set, or just simply a long, steady 5-hour, 6-hour ride. I tend to ride, when I do my long rides, I tend to ride above Ironman effort. But so I think of depending on what I can sustain during my race pep period. If I'm riding typically, in the 78 to 78, 79, 77% category, if I know I'm comfortably holding that for 5 to 6 hours during race prep, then that tells me I'm probably I'll ride probably that if that's based on threshold, of course. So I'll shoot for something between 72 and 74 typically, and on a course like Canada, maybe something a little less, and a course like Arizona, probably lower than 70 like I did in November.
What do you think of as a new athlete getting into long course racing, I may have done triathlons for a couple of years, I mean, wanting to invest in a PowerMeter, how is it going to help me in the real world? How is that device going to help me to better race execution? So throw that out to either of you or both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer this first. You know, the first thing that I purchased as an amateur athlete that really helped take me to the next level was a trainer that is an air trainer, so it had a power mode where I could fix the wattage load, do interval training. Having the ability to train like that in a cold climate during the winter was the most valuable investment I made. So that was my first introduction to power, was a simple air trainer. And the next best investment I made was my first PowerMeter, which was a power tap. You know, pretty easy barrier to entry, pretty low cost for a PowerMeter. Got the power tap, and immediately I was hooked on the numbers. You know, being an engineer, I'm a numbers guy, and it really allowed me to take my training and my racing to the next level. So I mean, there are no regrets about that. I can remember buying my first at the time. It was the Power Tap Pro. It was a yellow hub system, pretty archaic compared to the systems now, but you know, it still did everything that I wanted it to do. You know, measured my torque, and let me store the data for 5-6 hour rides, and go back and analyze it, store every race, and I still have all that data. I can compare a ride that I did 5 years ago to a ride that I did last week. So that's great information to have, to track, to see where your progress is, to see where you kind of fall back to in the off season, because typically, you know, I'll fall back around 10% of my FTP in the off season and quickly build back up. And, you know, the goal is to be right back around where I left off, if not a little bit higher. So I've found the investment in PowerMeter to be one of the best things to take my training and my racing to the next level.
And how much are you watching those power numbers during the race? Is your eyes fixed to that power measuring device? Are you trying to pay attention to not spiking your power, which is, you know, causing an erratic jump in power for a number of reasons, coming out of a corner, going up a steep incline? I mean, are you staring at it a lot?
When I first got a PowerMeter, I spent too much time staring at it. That was part of it. Was you become obsessed with the numbers. You want to look at it all the time. If you train and race enough with the PowerMeter, you'll become very comfortable with the numbers, and you just need casual glances as reinforcement. Your body is very good at having an internal pace clock and exertion clock, and so you should know internally basically what your effort is and what it should feel like. So a casual glance at the PowerMeter now is all it really takes to see if I'm on target or not. And that's the key when I race, is just to have casual glances at it. I like to keep it in front of my face so I can see it easily whenever I need to without drastically adjusting my position. But for the most part, you don't need to use it a lot when you race. It's beneficial to check where you are, to check your heart rate and your cadence against your perceived exertion. And then the best part that I like about it is it stores everything. So after the ride, immediately after the ride, I go home, I plug in my SRM cable, I download it, check it out, and I upload it in Cycling Peaks, and I can analyze exactly how my ride went. I can make comments on it right there. And that's the most valuable feedback for me, is to be able to look at my race after I'm done, because training is great, but racing is the goal, and so your power over any race distance is going to be the most valuable feedback you can get from your PowerMeter.
Chris?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, actually. I think that would be almost the exact words that would come out of my mouth. Just like you said, as far as racing is concerned, I mean, there might be a couple spots within the race where I would maybe stare at my PowerMeter, so to speak, and that would be, I mean, typically coming out of the water, heart rate's really high, your RPE is really out of whack, essentially, where you feel like you're riding probably really easy. You look down at your PowerMeter and it's like, I'm doing, let's say for me, 230 watts, which would be too much to sustain for a 5-hour ride. That would be maybe the first 10 minutes or so I'm staring at my PowerMeter just to make sure that I'm keeping my power in check. Hills, you know, some of the steeper hills and some of the longer hill climbs, like Richter's a great example in Canada. You know, I might be looking at it, making sure that I'm kind of keeping things under a cap for me around 240 watts, and then otherwise, I mean, I'm casually glancing down on occasion, and it's just like you said, you get this internal clock going, and I think you want to be in this comfortable rhythm. I think that's important, to find this comfortable RPE rhythm, right, and not really be kind of glued to your PowerMeter